Okay, everyone. Appreciate everybody coming in. This is going to be Crosswit. I believe we're at episode 5. Thank everybody for joining and listening to us. This is a pre-recorded episode, so if you're looking for us on live, this is the second episode that we've done that we're not live, pre-recorded. Real quick before we get into today's show, I'd just like to remind everyone we need your likes, your follows, your shares, all that kind of stuff. So please go to all of our social media platforms to include Facebook, YouTube, Podbean, and Instagram. And just hit everything. All right, like, share. We need your comments, but more especially on YouTube, we really do need your subscriptions. They affect our accounts, what we're able to do. So please go to YouTube, go to the Crosswit YouTube channel, and subscribe to us. Also, watch the videos, leave us some comments, leave us some likes, and then go to our Facebook page. If you're friends with me on my personal page, you can watch stuff there. Go to our Crosswit page, follow us there. And make sure you support us on our social media platforms. That's how we get out to you, and that's how we do everything we do. Everything we do is for free, so help us get Crosswit Talk out. And thank you guys for joining. So today I am here with a longtime friend of mine who is home from overseas. This is kind of a special episode here. We threw it together real quick because I wanted to get him on, and we were able to make the time. All right, so today's guest is Terry Ballard. Me and Terry go back... Geez, how many years do we go back now? What year is it? This is 2018? 20?
19, yeah.
Almost 20 years, okay? I'm finally to the age to where I can say I go back to somebody 20 years and not talking about my mom. So, I guess I've been there a while. You know what I did? And I'm going to get back to introduction. Last night, me and Sasha were talking, and I said, am I turning 43 or 42? And she said, you're turning 42. I said, oh, wow, I feel so much better about this year. I've been referring to myself as 42 years old for the entire
Ironically,
year. And
I came home right before my birthday thinking that I was 48, and Amanda said, no, you're 47, and I responded with, do the math, and she said, I did, and you're 47.
Wow. And I did the math last night too, and what's crazy is I'm an IMDb addict, so one of the ways I feel young, or I keep myself feeling not so bad about my age, is when I watch movies, I immediately, if I say, well, that person looks good, and I know they're kind of around my age, I look their age up, and it makes me feel better about myself. And I'm always real good at figuring out ages real fast, but I didn't even know my own age. So a long time ago, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say, I haven't heard that name in a long time, but a long time ago, when I was just young kid, I joined the Marine Corps. And after I spent a few years in the National Guard, and I was 21, and I joined the Marine Corps, went to boot camp, went to infantry training battalion, become a grunt, and was hoping to be stationed on the West Coast. They had sent me to to boot camp on the West Coast. I went to infantry training on the West Coast, and theoretically I should have been assigned to a West Coast infantry battalion in 1st Marine Division. However, I was not. They sent our entire class to the East Coast. I went to Camp Lejeune, and then one night, late one night, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, we were marched across a quad to join our 1st Fleet Unit, which was 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. And that is the night. Well, I didn't meet you that night.
No, it was on the catwalk. I remember.
Oh, okay. So on the catwalk, and I remember you guys were perched up there, and I remember Horton and a couple of these other dudes that looked like gargoyles, just setting up on, just muscled out, just got back from float and did nothing but, work out all the time and eat and take supplements.
Orange Crush.
Yeah. And when I got there, I remember looking up there and seeing all these shirtless, 20-year-old dudes like freaking Hulk sitting up there, and they just like gargoyles, and they were just waiting for us. And I mean, it's pretty intimidating, especially knowing they'd been waiting up all night for us. And anyway, so that was the night I met Terry Ballard here. At the time, he was Corporal Ballard, and later Sergeant, I think. But Terry was my first. He wasn't actually my squad leader. I went to 2nd Squad. You were 1st Squad, but you were, for all purposes, for all what I remember, the acting platoon sergeant most of the time. I know we had Sergeant Johnson, and I think you kind of replaced him as he moved out, and then we did have a platoon sergeant, but even when he was our platoon sergeant, you were kind of still the platoon sergeant. And I'm talking about Staff Sergeant Collingsworth, because he was always busy and had stuff going on. But so that's when I met I met Terry. We did a few years together. I left the battalion about the same time you left the battalion, I think. Mm-hmm. Terry left the Marine Corps. I went on to the Recon Battalion, and then we just kind of really didn't talk for years. Social media kind of brought us together. We both took a very similar path. Both worked as overseas contractors for the same company, right? We worked for the same company. We didn't run into each other during that period, but we did work for the same company for a while. I did that for a couple years, got out and came home. Terry did it for a while longer, and through me, met the lady he's with now, and actually ended up moving here, worked for the Sheriff's Department, and technically still, you're kind of on leave went back overseas, and currently you're overseas working as a security consultant for a contracting company, and possibly coming back here pretty soon to pick the badge back up and join us. Man, I appreciate you coming on. Awesome to have you here, dude. So what's been, I gave the long spiel, you fill in the details. What's been going on?
Not too much, just working, coming home, visiting family. Just like you said, we first met each other in the Marine Corps, and you stayed quite a bit longer than I did. I got out, went back to school, finished up that, and through a long story, ended up here in Arkansas. And it's funny because I went to Arkansas once for training, and I can remember when I was in Arkansas, I was like, man, there's absolutely nothing here. And of course, I was
kind of like Camp Lejeune in a way, right?
Actually, it was even worse. But I'll throw a little plug. I was working for the Department of Energy, and they sent us to Darcy up in Galloway, Arkansas.
For those that don't know what Darcy is, what is that?
Direct Action Resource Center. Okay. It's a place where a lot of units go and train. It's run by a really great guy, Robert Mason. I still extol some of the virtues and little nuggets and gems that he imparted on us at the time. But I got sent there to do training, and at the time, I'm sure it's expanded now, but at the time there was an iron skillet and a McDonald's.
Wow.
At the exit and one hotel.
So
for a week, my partner and I lived off the iron skillet and McDonald's and anything we could get from a fast food restaurant while we were involved in the training. But
what kind of training did you do there?
We did the Advanced Urban Warfare Unassisted Asset Recovery class.
Which that's a really, really long title. Wow.
It's probably, I don't know if Richard's still doing the class or not, but
break that down in some simple terms. What was that?
CQB.
Close quarters battle.
Close quarters battle. So
all you Call of Duty guys, people out there have no idea what we're talking about. Talking about clearing rooms. Well, if you play Call of Duty, you know exactly. You're probably better at it on in your mind than some of the top SEALs. But you think you are.
He expands it in the course that I went to. It's expanded a little bit. He starts you off simple room, simple hallway, then complex rooms, complex hallways, and you go from that to using outer perimeter teams to using to going into his combat town, crossing alleyways, streets. He has subterranean, whether it be cave, and this is early 2000 when we were fighting in caves in Afghanistan.
Right.
So he had simulated things like that, sewer systems, everything. Very nice training facility. But everything is simunitions, so you're getting shot the whole time. With simunitions.
What simunitions is too, I'm going to kind of jump in here a couple times. Simunitions is a system, I guess you could say the most general way to explain it would be you're firing blank rounds, but they actually have projectiles on them. I say that blank rounds. They're real rounds, regular rounds casings. They have projectiles on them. And they're like a pace projectile, so it's kind of think like paintball, but with like a 9mm round paintball type of thing. And then usually the weapon's adapted to fire that. So it stings quite a bit.
Correct.
And anyway,
so most of the training's done. but all the training is done with that. And then he does a lot of other things to make it more realistic. He uses shotgun blank rounds to simulate taking RPG fire and things like that when you're in the combat town, and he's up on an elevated position. And when you're in the shoot house, he's basically guiding the opposition force against you. So, I mean, he can make it as hard or as easy as he wants to. So, like I said, I was in Arkansas doing that, and I thought to myself, man, there's absolutely nothing here. But now that I'm here, you realize you're right. There was nothing here. No. I mean, I'm very happy to be here. It's a great. Monticello is a great little place to live. I'm a small town guy, and I love the vibe and the feel of this place. And there's some really good people in this community. So what you're telling me is when you're done on your overseas trip, if I can talk, that you are definitely coming back here. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Awesome. So you went to Darcy. What else did you do? Did I skip that on? You worked for the Department of Energy. Worked for the Department of Energy for a little while. Did some training evolutions for them. I worked for a couple of different contract companies, but all doing the same thing: training SRT, basic pistol and rifle, breaching, room clearing. Pretty much their whole, everything that's in the Department of Energy curriculum as far as weapons and tactics. Right. The National Training Center for the Department of Energy out in Albuquerque. I lived there for a little while and worked there. Came back to Oak Ridge in Tennessee. Worked at Oak Ridge for a little while. So what does the Department of Energy do? What is their overall mission? As far as the Department of Energy's mission overall has to do with all the energy, everything basically that has to do with energy, and they oversee fuel, they oversee solar, they oversee nuclear. My experience with the Department of Energy was in the field of security, and basically nuclear security as predominantly Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12. And, Y-12 National Security Complex, they have a broad mission that I really don't want to go into specifics about. But, I mean, you can get on the internet and research a lot of this stuff, and it's all out there. I don't want to be the one that puts it out there, because I don't want to destroy. I like that. I don't want to destroy my cell phone with a hammer. So I like that. I like that mentality. People often will ask you questions about stuff that you're whether it's classified or just OPSEC or just not professional to talk about. They'll ask questions about something, and you're like, well, I'm not really comfortable talking about that. And they're like, well, I can read about it on Google. Okay, well then read about it on Google. Yeah, okay, but I'm not going to be the guy. It's not coming from me. Right. I've got a security clearance in the works right now. You're not any reason why mine gets denied. Right. So. And then I left there, went to Afghanistan, worked over in Afghanistan for a little while. DOD contractor, DOS contractor. Came back to the States, became a police officer. Never been a police officer before. Trained quite a few, again, doing the weapons and tactics thing, but never worked as one. And I have to say it's a very eye-opening experience. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about that. All right, I know my experience, and I've talked about it on here in a few episodes that we had. I think I've talked about it here, coming from the military, especially our type of military experience, to law enforcement. And I've talked about my experience. So tell me about your impressions. I remember when you started, and like I said, me and you have a very similar background. And I remember when you started, I remember when you came over, and what was your initial adjustment, your mentality? Talk about your mentality or just initial adjustment to law enforcement. What were your perceptions on the differences, as far as your skill sets and your mentality? Talk to me a minute about that, because I've got plenty to talk about. Right. Well, I mean, it's very, again, you go back, you have to, everything's relative. So if you look at the institutions that I've been a part of and how I've been trained in a very rigid mentality, and then you fast forward to a very relaxed area, small town setting, it's obviously not as rigid. You have way more flexibility than what people perceive. There's a lot of gray area rather than, guilty, not guilty. You're not Judge Dredd. You don't make that decision on the side of the road, So I think probably my biggest adjustment was not being under such a rigid guidelines. I mean, yourself, all the training that we've been through and all the policies and procedures that we've had to operate under in the past, they don't exist in that form, I guess.
It's more freedom, and we're mainly talking about around here, and we're not obviously speaking for all law enforcement in every area and every type, but I started with a city and I came to the county, and I saw a huge difference just in that aspect from what you're talking about. I mean, even the county aspect of me getting into my truck and taking off for 12 hours and really very few direct calls, basically knowing what the sheriff's intention is, what his policies and what his mindset is, and just going out there on your own and trying to represent. There's a huge amount of freedom. Where do I drive? What am I going to go look at patrol-wise, and how do I respond to stuff? So, big difference in the mentality coming from even some of the more, I guess you could say, operationally freedom-themed missions or jobs in the military to this. Almost no oversight. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing and have an idea of what you're planning on. So you worked for the county. You worked for the 2 years before you went back?
3.
3 years. Wow. I didn't even realize that's long. I worked for the city for, I guess, 4 years. So anyway, while you were working for the county, you did a couple things. You kind of continued your training as far as with, and I know me and you only worked together for like a year before you. Okay. So, but you kind of continued. You were the firearms instructor primarily for the county. You didn't have the qualifications and stuff, I believe, and definitely probably the most experienced. Not nothing on anyone else, but definitely as far as the type of stuff we do.
Right.
The most experience on the firearms end. So, somewhat of a gun enthusiast, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a selective gun enthusiast. There are some people that can talk about everything from, types of powder to the ballistic coefficients, barrels, everything else. My window is pretty small, but I mean, I try to educate myself. You and I have talked about before, long-range rifle stuff, and my window on that's pretty small, and I've had 308s or 7.62, whatever you want to call it, and I've always condensed myself back down to the 5.56 or the 223, and mainly because I know that cartridge, I know that caliber. So I do enjoy shooting, I enjoy training, and you asked me earlier what was one of the things that took me a little bit to get used to. And maybe I misspoke, but this is another thing that sticks out in my mind is the majority of the guys that I've worked with in the past were all gun guys.
Right.
And maybe it was because they were weapons and tactics instructors, but it's like that was part of their, or one of their hobbies, or part of their hobbies, or their major. It's a huge part of who they were. Yeah, it's a huge part of what they were. So they were all gun guys.
Right.
And I guess one of the things that just kind of blows me away from the time I went to the police academy, well, even further back than that, when I would teach classes that had law enforcement officers in there, up until really when I went to the police academy and saw it on a large scale and then began working as a police officer, that you meet guys that, and again, I don't want to give the impression that our only and our first tool as law enforcement officers is a gun, but it's your tool. If you have to defend yourself, right, in a life or death situation, more than likely that's the tool you're going to use. And kind of blew me away that I would meet guys that would say, well, I'm just not a gun guy. So to me, and again, this is my opinion, that's like you're going to put an addition.
You're like, dude, I don't know if you know it or not, but you have one stuck to your side there.
Right. To me, it's like
it's like don't move. It's right there.
like,
Let me get it for you.
So I can bring this home really quickly. It's like if I came here to the gym and I walked in and I saw Matt and I said, hey, I'm wanting a gym membership, and I was hoping that, you guys might have had a trainer here.
Weights guy.
And Matt looks at me and he goes, well, I'm not really a weights guy, so, you may have come to the wrong spot. Or if you are going to put an addition on your house, and this guy shows up and you say, well, I'm wanting to put this addition on my house, whatever, and the guy says, well, I'm not really a hammer and nail kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, what exactly is it that you do here?
You're not going to hire that guy.
Right.
So when I speak to a guy who works in armed security, diplomatic security, law enforcement, and he says, well, I'm just really not a gun guy, it gives me reservation about that person.
Yeah.
So maybe, like I said, maybe I misspoke originally, but that's also one of the things that kind of was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, is that the lack of, and do you think, because, and I think a lot of that is, some of it's just guys have never realized that they're supposed to be a gun guy. And I'll say it. I mean, okay, here's my opinion on it. Whether or not you are intimately into guns, is one thing. But the fact that you carry one on the side of your hip, that it's not like, just by coincidence it just happened to stick on your side when you brushed, a gun safe or something. I mean, you put this thing on your side. And I don't really give a shit whether or not you like guns or not. For some reason that's completely, probably only known to you, not me, you decided to pick a profession that is a gun profession, which means you have this crazy freaking responsibility to the people around you to know what you're doing with a gun, and to be proficient at it, because if you have to utilize that weapon, when we were in the Marine Corps, there's a lot of times where you're going to be in a combat situation, you're going to be engaging targets, and quite honestly, what's in front of you is the bad guy, and maybe there's nothing else in front of you have to be concerned with other than bad guys, and I'm not trying to classify all combat situations at all, but I'm saying there may be situations like that. But how many times a law enforcement officer, if you have to utilize your gun, is the only concern past you is going to be the bad guy?
Right.
You know what I mean? There's almost always going to be a threat to innocent people, in the range, the spectrum of what you're using. So, if you're not a gun guy, maybe you should fucking get that way, or take it off and be a jailer, or do something that that doesn't have a gun. So I mean, I feel you on there, but you're right. There's a lot of dudes that aren't in with it. And sometimes I wonder if that's a safety argument, because they're not proficient with it and they don't want to be tested and they don't want to be, and it's just kind of like, well, I qualify, but I'm not really a gun guy,
right.
Anyway.
Well, and also, speaking of qualification, and I'm sure we'll bounce around a lot during this conversation, but speaking of qualification, people say, I'll ask somebody, well, how often do you guys train? Well, we qualify twice a year. Well, that's interesting, because I didn't ask you how many times you qualify. I asked you how often you train. And if you're fooling yourself,
if you
think that they're the same thing, because again, I can make 1,000 analogies between the gym,
right,
and between firearms training. So if I came to the gym and I said, hey, I asked just some random person, hey, how often do you train? Well, I max out once a month. That's the equivalent of me saying, hey, how often do you train? And somebody says, well, I qualify twice a year. That's the same thing. You're giving me a quantifiable measure of your ability to engage paper in a certain time frame.
Under that stress, whatever
under,
it may or may not be.
Under no duress.
Yeah.
So
probably
you're given a false answer, or you're answering a question that I didn't ask you. So,
and most of that's out of ignorance. A lot of these guys don't understand there's a difference. Because I'll give you an example, and I'm not trying to dog the academy or anything else, but when I went to the academy, and I know you went to the academy after me, and I know it's changed since both me and you went. But when I went to the academy, I remember, we went to the range, we shot, and then they told us, okay, you're going to run a practice, and this was like the whole week is supposed to be firearms training, right? Or at least that's how I remember it. Maybe I'm wrong. But we sat there, and we're in a firearms training segment, and you go to the range, and they tell you, okay, we have some classes, and then we're going to do, you guys are going to shoot, and it's like this is day one. All right, we're going to run a practice qual. Okay, so everyone shoots a practice qual. And then, it's not difficult to me, so me and the other guy that went to the academy with me from our agency, we did pretty good on that, pretty well on that, And then they said, okay, now we're going to run another qual. And then we ran the real qual. And then we shot it. So to me, now, in my mind, in your mindset, we're at the baseline. We met the baseline to start training, right?
A standard.
That's kind of what I thought we would be. I thought, we're at the baseline. Now we can start training. No, go home. What? Go home, you guys are done. What do you mean go home? Like for the day? No, for the week. Wait, what? You guys are qualified. You don't need to be here anymore. Okay. What about more training? Go train back at your agency, which should probably have been set up to do that, to make up the difference or something. And I understand that the academy, they have bigger issues than we can, and it's not their responsibility. And it's their responsibility to train to a certain extent. But let's face it, the academy's not going to be there after you graduate anyway. So your agencies, it's going to be your agencies and your firearms, with yourself and your agency and your firearms instructor's responsibility to keep you trained, not qualified.
Right.
So I'm not blaming them. I understand ammunition and issues or whatever, but it was just surprising to me, coming from a military background, to where that would have been like the baseline. Okay, you guys qualified, you're safe enough to shoot. We went up to Tier 1 to do the SWAT qualification course. That's exactly what it was. Everyone gets online. Do a safeties check. Everyone's going to shoot the speed and accuracy course, and everyone that passed it, they're like, okay, you guys are good to start training. It was a safety standard. Right. It wasn't like the end. It was the beginning.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I guess also you have to look at the, again, you're talking about a basic academy. So what have they outlined as their goal?
Well, it probably
for you to be qualified. For you to be safe, or for you to leave there with a passing score.
Right.
They never said they were going to train you on how to train.
Right. That's right.
So, you have to, again, it's relative. You have to take it for what it is. Speaking from...
And interrupt you real quick, I'm sorry. They have to deal... Their primary concern isn't me.
Right.
They've got a lot of people they've got to get to that level.
Right.
And if they focus on... And they're put in a weird position, but there's people they do have to train to get to that standard. So if you're already at that standard, they're almost forced to say, all right, get out of the way, because now we've got to get people to where you are, because that's what we're supposed to do. So anyway, in fairness to them, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, speaking from my experience as an instructor, and when I say instructor, I don't mean like these 5-person classes, one-man, one-on-one situations. I'm talking about a class of 30, 40 students.
Right.
And we have guys that came from, I worked at Acme Explosive Factory, and now I'm wanting to carry a gun for a living. So, excuse me, you have a guy who shows up and he doesn't even know how to operate the weapon. So you have to start from the ground, from the ground up, and then, if you got a guy who, just say for instance, you have a dude that comes from, a special operations background, shoots IDPA and USPSA on the weekends, and is about as high speed, no drag as you can get.
Yeah.
There's no way in a limited amount of time that I'm going to be able to pass on any knowledge to that guy to probably improve him any.
Yeah.
Again, I mentioned before nuggets. You might pick up on a nugget somewhere that's something that you haven't been exposed to, But as far as being able to focus my energy and attention on taking this guy from being able to engage 2 targets in the time it takes him to engage 1 target, it's not going to happen, because I got a guy over here who is putting rounds in the magazine backwards.
Yeah.
And I've got to focus my energy on this guy.
Yeah, and it's got to frustrate the instructors there, because they've got to deal with both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
And they've got this guy who they basically got to say, "Hey man, good job. Now get out of my face," so I can focus on the guy who doesn't know how to put his.
And when you
magazine
see a guy, I like to see people get better.
Right.
I'm not the best shooter. I'm not the fastest guy. I'm not the strongest guy. I'm not the most intelligent guy. But I always try to make myself better. Seems like the older we get, the harder that is. But anyway, so when you see a guy who's high speed, no drag, is very capable in his trade, you naturally gravitate to that guy, or you want to gravitate to that guy, because you want to see, hey, how fast can I get this guy? How much can I push this guy? How much can this guy improve in the little amount of time I have contact with him? But then you also, in the back of your mind, you have to remember that you've got these people over here that
need you,
that direly need you.
And this guy is going to be, obviously you're always trying to get better, and obviously he probably knows that as well as anyone. He's the guy that wants to get better, or he wouldn't be as good as he is. But these instructors know that, okay, if this guy gets into some stuff tomorrow, he's probably going to be okay.
Right.
Or at least he stands a really good chance of being okay. But if this guy over here gets in a situation tomorrow, it's going to be disastrous if I don't help him. So, they do have to make decisions. And, like you said, that's what it is.
Well, and you get two ends of the spectrum also. You get that guy. I guess there's 2 ends of the spectrum, but you also have the middle of the spectrum. The middle of the spectrum is the person who wants to do well, who may not necessarily have all the tools in their toolbox to do well or improve on how well they're doing. You got the guy who's going to work himself to death to always be better at everything he does. And then I've also had experience where, I see a gentleman during rifle qualifications having a problem putting his sling on, taking a purchase on the weapon, putting the sling for his rifle on. And I walk over and I say, hey, just in a joking manner, I just don't want to just go right into it. So I say, hey, you having a little problem with that sling? Yeah, laughs at me a little bit. And I said, well, how long you been working here? 23 years. And I say, well, you've been working here 23 years and you don't know how to put the sling on? No, but I figured out I'd get a paycheck every Thursday. So there's your bar. There's not your bar, but that's the group that you're working with.
Right.
Everything from, and then, that's probably the guy also that when you ask him, are you a gun guy? He says, no, but I'm very good at doing
directed bus traffic.
Not directed bus traffic, but even, I'm just very good at doing, gardening or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you don't, unless he's got a side business as a landscaper.
Right.
I don't know that gardening is going to ever save his life or put money on the table.
Apocalyptic world maybe he's forming and stuff, but not in the context we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So tell us about what's going on with you right now. Obviously I know you're, probably can't get too much into things, but on the training aspect aside and the generality, how much are you getting to shoot? Or are you getting you getting experience with any type of different weapons? What's your kind of situation at over there?
Right now, we do initial training with the group that I work with right now, and we also do a lot of group training on our own. You have to be familiar with your common tasks, just like in the Marine Corps or any military. You have a medal, a mission essential task list. You start with a mission essential task list. The basic things that you need to do in order to do your job properly, and we focus a lot of our training on that. As far as shooting different weapons, and this will probably lead to another conversation, but
Hopefully.
Everybody in the United States has been glocked.
Yes.
So,
including SOCOM now.
Everybody's been glocked.
Even the SEALs have given up the SIGs and went to the 19s.
So there are different weapons out there, and I have had an opportunity to shoot some of them, and for the most part, they function and they put lead down range, and that's really all that we need to have them do. So we train on a pretty consistent basis, but I think overall, people develop prejudices, and me included. I have a prejudice toward the AR-15 as far as a long gun goes, and you kind of broke me out of that a little bit with the MP5, and I started looking at 9mm platforms and looked at the CZ Scorpion, which is very similar to MP5.
Yeah, you told me about that.
And then, being overseas and working with different weapon systems, I see that the AR-15 isn't the only rifle out there that works. Now, am I more comfortable with it? Yes. Do I think it's a overall better platform? Well, yeah, but I mean,
versatility-wise.
Yeah, but you got to work with what you can get.
Yeah.
And everywhere is not the United. We have to remember, everywhere is not the United States.
Right.
I mean, there's countries. I work with some guys that are from Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And it's funny. When I mention going to shoot or going to the range or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, you can have guns," and there's even an issue with them having a knife in their car.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they say if you go to a checkpoint and you see the police are there and they check your vehicle, you got a knife there, like you need to have a reason
to have a knife.
To have a knife on you.
Man, we live in a different country.
Yeah. So, you're not able to get AR-15s everywhere in the world, and you're not able to, train as openly as we are here.
Right.
But, like I said, we still are able to do it.
I think too, coming and talking about the different weapon systems, and actually, it's funny because coming out, I guess you say maybe the old school military mindset, and of course a lot changed. We've been at war for a long time now, and we started getting toward the mid. We started getting smarter about how we fought. But there's the old mentality that still, kind of persevered through even the more recent years, that you had to have one type of thing for everything.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about having, I guess you could say. You had to have all your gear set up one way so that everybody was compatible and everyone knew where everything was, and you had to have, and this needed to work in all environments, and there had to be, versatility among all things. It was very, there's a very, I guess you could say, it was kind of shunned against to think, well, to have different loadout kits or different things for different, whatever. But we saw this, from our different military occupations later on to contracting and things like that. That no, I mean, if you're, if I'm a driver, my kit does not need to be the same as if I'm, if I'm riding seating, or if I'm a sniper, I'm not going to have the same weapon system or the same kit that the guy, going through the doors are, and or even if I'm, whatever. But it was almost, you're almost taught or not allowed to, or there's maybe a mentality against, or I guess it was more or less promoted to have, just one way, and then make everything work for that way, or make make that way work for everything. And to an extent, I can understand that, to an extent, that there are situations and missions to where, and I know this especially in some of the stuff I do now, to where I can, literally be in a surveillance position or going through a door or whatever, like that. So in a sense, I understand trying to keep, to a certain extent, that being possible,
right.
But I don't think that should be the focus. An MP5 is not going to be a good weapon for every situation, obviously, but it's a good weapon for what it's meant for. And if I have access to that weapon, and have access to an AR, and have access to maybe an AR-10 or whatever, that's what I love about about where we are now, as far as handguns, as far as gears, whatever, is setting yourself up to say, I can kind of specialize, and set up my gear and stuff too. Because I was in that mentality too. I thought, for a long time, I thought the M4 was the solution to everything. It was almost like, your M4 was was the end all to what
Right.
he needed, except for sniper stuff, except for an actual sniper mission. Even some of the, that stuff, that the M4 was everything. And then, then you get exposed to different weapon systems that you think are cool, but it just seemed like everywhere you turn around, everyone was just going to this, and kits or whatever. But I like the fact that in our job now is you can whatever you want as long as you're proficient at it.
And I think you and I kind of go back and forth. I have a sickness when it comes to pistols, but I think for the most part, you and I are anomalies, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you carry a 9mm pistol.
I do.
Excuse me, and I'm a 9mm pistol guy also. And now everybody's saying, "Oh, well, the FBI is going back to 9mm, so everybody's going back to 9mm."
Yeah.
Well, my response to people when they say, "Well, the 9mm is an anemic cartridge," is I say, "Well, you find a guy that's been shot by a 9mm that'll tell me that, and I'll believe that."
Right.
And same thing with a 380 or 22.
Yeah.
One of my very, very, very good friends, I can remember his wife was shot with bird shot, like in her back,
Right, yeah.
And obviously she lived, all this other stuff, whatever. But I'm sure, I can remember her saying that it wasn't a, pleasant experience, and she wasn't like,
"Oh, it was no big deal. It was just
man, that bird shot felt so good. I wanted them to shoot me like one or two more times." So, the person that'll argue that they need a 40 cal, a 45, a 44, a 50 cal, that's fine. It goes back to our conversation earlier about, the whole idea that you have your way of doing things, I have my way,
right,
and I'm open to that or whatever. And like I said, I like a 45 also. But
you're. I mean, most times I saw you in a range. You had a 45.
And I like a 45, but I believe that I'm drifting back to that whole 9mm thing. And now you look at ballistics. You alluded to earlier that old school military mentality. One of the things that's come out of the global war on terrorism is technology as it relates to things that we had sat on for years.
Oh yeah.
You look at the first thing right off the bat people are going to mention is camouflage pattern. We've researched all these camouflage patterns, and ironically, Marsoc's wearing woodland. They're wearing the woodland pattern.
Yeah, the old school stuff.
Yeah,
we got all
this stuff. And then multicam was supposed to be multi-camouflage, and now you've got multicam black, multicam jungle, multicam arid.
It's a fad. I don't care what they say.
And here's
whatever looks. Everybody wants to be different. Everybody wants to have a cool look. Everybody wants to,
And well, I'm going to get off on a tangent here, but I'm going to try to refocus myself. Okay. The gun world is the same way. People, and again, my opinion, this is all this is. You can agree, disagree, turn the podcast off, whatever you want to, but the 40 caliber cartridge is an answer to a question that didn't exist. And everybody went to the 40, I got a 40 cal, I got a 40 cal, I got a 40 cal, civilians and law enforcement agencies. And now, people are like, you know what? I think I'm going to buy a 9mm. And then you had 357 SIG rolled around. And for people that aren't, it's not a 357. It's a 40 caliber casing with a 9mm bullet, neck down to a 9mm bullet. So essentially, it's a 9mm plus P, which means plus pressure or whatever
right.
you want. I think I may have misspoke, but I believe it's plus pressure. But it's just a more powerful 9mm round. Right. It has more velocity. So every problem that could be solved with a 357 SIG could have been solved with a 9mm plus P.
Right.
Or plus P plus, which is even more powerful.
Yeah.
So the person will say, well, 9mm can't get it done. I needed a 40 cal. I needed a 357 SIG, or I needed this, or I needed that. And the 45 caliber cartridge has been around for, forever. And the 9mm cartridge from Europe, obviously, has been around forever. And anything that you need to get done, you can get done with those two.
Yeah.
Global availability for both is going to be high. They're both NATO cartridges. So everybody that wants you can buy whatever gun you want to. I'm not telling you what to buy.
Sure.
But, you can do what you need to do with those two cartridges.
But if you can't hit the target where it needs to be hit, it doesn't matter what caliber.
Right.
And that's really what it goes to. Everyone gets talking, the stopping power this, stopping power that. Well, I mean, the stopping power of putting a bullet, in between the eyes, and I'm obviously not talking about a law enforcement training scenario because we don't teach that, so I'll give that disclaimer. I'm talking about in a combat scenario. I'm talking about a life and death decision, whatever it may be, whether it's whatever. And most people, if you're trained to that ability, if you can do that consistently and not just on a paper target at certain ranges under no stress and all that, but if you're training to hit the target exactly where it needs to be hit to stop, to kill the opponent, to end it, then 9mm, whatever you train with is going to be your answer. I mean, whatever you're proficient with, and you have to train with that to do that. And I remember hearing one of the guys on one of the other podcasts I listened to. This is not my quote, so I can't source. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I've often said this, and they were mainly talking about suppression fire versus, and they're not talking about suppression necessarily in the way it's, literal sense of what we use it for, but just talking about throwing rounds down range versus hit your target. And I think the quote was, throwing a bunch of lead down range, works sometimes. And when it comes to the bad guys, that will work on, the average fighter out there, not the true believer. But when you're engaged with a true believer, the only thing that's going to stop that engagement is going to be a well-placed round.
Exactly.
So just remember this, sometimes throwing a lot of lead down range will stop an engagement, but putting a round into the opponent where it needs to go, into the enemy where it needs to go, will stop a gunfight 100% of the time.
Right.
And that is the mentality, whatever your personal choice and whatever your reasons are for your caliber and your weapon system or whatever, at the forefront of all that needs to be the type of training that enables you to do that. And if you're not going for that goal, then it doesn't matter whether whether you're using anything.
Well, I use a lot of analogies when I used to use a lot of analogies when I taught, and I use a lot of analogies when I speak. But if you're sitting at the house and you got a ham sandwich, and your dog, whatever kind of dog it may be, maybe it's a Saint Bernard or a Tibetan Mastiff,
or Richard
even.
Parker, my
Richard Parker. But my point is, just supporting what you said. If Richard Parker wants that sandwich, you can stomp your foot and clap your hand, and Richard Parker's probably going to leave your sandwich away.
Right.
But if you've got a timber wolf standing there and he wants that sandwich.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
More than likely, clapping your hand and stomping your foot
it's just going to make him look at you as dessert.
Exactly. You're probably going to lose your sandwich and maybe an appendage. So that's you're right. You have to look at your opponent when you're looking at what level of force you apply. Again, that again goes back to training. You and I have been exposed to force continuum. A lot of people aren't exposed to force continuum, and we're talking about the level of force from Richard Parker to the Timberwolf. And sometimes you have to be able not only to move up,
but to move back down.
And like I said, a lot of people don't realize that. But you mentioned something just a minute ago, and I was trying to grasp onto it with my memory, because I'm either 47 or 48. I can't remember. But one thing I was going to say is talking about the accuracy portion of firearms training and that being more important. A guy told me one time that you die because of two things, either electricity or blood loss.
Right.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Or he said
I see where you're going with this.
He said electricity or hydraulics, right?
Right.
So when you talk about electricity, you talk about brainstem,
impulses, your nervous system.
Yeah, and basically switching off that electricity.
Absolutely.
And then when you talk about hydraulics, you talk about blood loss.
Yeah.
And again, we develop these false narratives based on what we see on Hollywood and everything. But if I'm not mistaken, you can lose up to almost 85% of your blood volume, which is a lot, before your body is completely hydraulically incapacitated.
Okay.
So in training, if you're not training to continue to fight, if you're injured, or you're not training to continue to fight while you've already been engaged and taken around or whatever, you're only short-sheeting yourself.
Right. Because
you begin to instill that surrender mentality. Oh, I've taken around. And that's one of the things, again, this is kind of a shotgun.
It's a 30-40%, but I'm not sure if that's talking about before you're incapacitated or before you actually die. So I'm not really sure, what amount that is.
I think the guy that was talking to me was actually talking about, like, you can recognize, like I could recognize that Matt's pointing a gun at me, and I can still cause my trigger finger to fire around with.
Well, yeah, this says significantly more. This says 10 pints before your body goes into shutdown or shock or whatever. But anyway, a lot of blood. That's a lot of blood.
Yeah, that's a lot of blood. So my point being is, in your training, if you don't train yourself to continue to fight through stress, through shock, through incapacity, or what would be perceived by normal individuals incapacitation, you're short-sheeting yourself.
Well, you're going to train yourself to do one of two things. You're going to train yourself to succeed, or you're going to train yourself to quit.
Right.
And succeeding, once you've determined that you're going to succeed, that you're not going to quit, then you succeed until your body shuts down and you physically can't succeed. It's never a decision that you make.
Right.
It's a decision that physics makes. It's a decision that whatever. But if you train yourself to quit, physics, nothing else ever gets a chance. Mm-hmm. And like what you said, as soon as you train to, we were at the range the other night. We were doing a night shoot, and I was trying not to lose my mind because I was trying to recognize the level, But when we were doing some of the basic scenarios, and they were all based around, nothing really horrible, but sometimes it was, we would run night scenarios where nothing would happen, and sometimes the worst thing imaginable could happen, right? And we're talking about guys that would, and it was a patrol scenario to where the person would, get a call to check out the suspicious person that someone had called about for whatever reasons, and they would go through and make contact with that person. They'd talk to them, kind of get a feel for them, maybe check them out, run their whatever. And most of the time, nothing would ever happen, and it would be a completely normal reason why what they were doing or whatever. But sometimes, without any warning whatsoever, it would turn into a fight, mm-hmm. or even a shootout or whatever. And I couldn't believe how many times that when the weapon, and granted, these are untrained. These people are untrained. But sometimes you forget. We always judge ourselves we always compare ourselves to our peers. Mm-hmm. So I remember in the Marine Corps always thinking that we sucked. Like in the infantry or whatever, thinking, man, we suck. We suck. Because in my mind, I'm thinking that, I've got my mindset on, like, Delta Force or something. But then you get out here, you get in the regular world, and you realize, dude, if we train consistently and do anything to where we're good at it, we're pretty good, Yeah. I think it was maybe Robert O'Neill or maybe Mark Luttrell or someone, one of the those guys, that said, we weren't really that good. Everyone else just sucks. And of course he's shortchanging himself, I think, as far as their training. My point is that, it doesn't take it takes some consistency and dedication. But how many times that whenever these guys, whether they had a weapons malfunction, or maybe they were out of ammunition, or they thought the scenario should quit, mm-hmm. or in their mind, cut, then they completely stopped. And right out there in the middle of it, and I, just sitting there and watching, a weapon, malfunction, and this person go completely administrative and just sit there and try to figure out what's going on. And I'm just watching them. They're in the spotlight, and I'm going, you're getting killed right now. You're getting killed right now. And it's more than just, it is a decision that you have to take yourself to where, when I went to the SWAT course, I remember Sid Jordan, who's one of the instructors there, and we were doing simunition, and he kind of joked on me, because I can tell your background. because we went in there, simunition 9mm handguns are notorious for, like problems, whatever. But when we went to the room, and I can't remember if we were transitioning or if we were just going in with handguns. I can't remember the scenario. But I know when we went in there, we did some combat clearing. I kind of potted the room off. You got the majority of it, so I'm going to hit my corner. And whenever I come in there and hit my corner and the targets, and of course they're up on the catwalks watching, I had a weapons malfunction, tap rag bang, and I started, basically I was just changing magazines and going. And I took a knee so my other guys could clear, but I actually took a knee and I'm sitting there and he said he was laughing at me because as I'm shooting and I'm getting weapons malfunction, I'm changing magazines, but I'm constantly working through the problem and I'm shooting like one round at a time. I'm like bam, bam, I'm just doing all this work. And he laughed, he goes, "You're just not gonna quit on it, are you?" And I said, and they finally cut the scenario. And he said, "I can tell." He said, "I wasn't laughing at you. Right. I was laughing because it was funny to watch a guy that absolutely did, even though we were in training scenario, you could tell it never left your mind. You were just going back to what you do, and that is work through the problem. Right. But the way we were taught, the way we were trained was, we've already made up our mind a long time ago. We're trained we're trained not to quit. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird thing for me to have to adjust and train someone because of that void, because they don't have that in them at all, or they made the decision, or they don't know, or whatever, to teach someone, like you said, how many times the old way, when in training scenarios, when a guy gets shot, no matter what, it's like the Hollywood thing. A person gets shot in a scenario and, okay, you're dead. Yeah. And we did that. We saw that in the Marine Corps back in the old days. It was like, okay.
Miles Gear days before, and that was one of the things I've written down here that I was wanting to bring up is the Miles Gear. I've heard people say training scar, but it's just a fallacy of training with Miles Gear is, we used Miles Gear in the Department of Energy. We used Miles Gear when I was in the Marine Corps 1,000 years ago. And for people that don't know, Miles Gear is
laser tag.
Basically
laser tag.
Where you use regular weapons platforms. You train with Miles Gear, you get shot one time with one bullet, and your Miles Gear vest goes off, and it sounds an audible tone, and a light flashes, and you're considered dead most of the time.
And let me interrupt you for a second, because I want to explain what Miles Gear was really intended for. It's really not intended for close quarters battle or realistic combat between you and me. It's intended for mass exercises. Mm-hmm. It's so the generals can get an idea, assuming that every person that was shot died. Worst case scenario, how many losses are we looking on the battlefields? Because it's not just for people, it's for equipment. They got Miles Gear for armored vehicles and everything. So it's a real rough thing. Now it was used, and I don't know why, maybe because we didn't have anything better or whatever, but it was mistakenly kind of, I think, inappropriately used for CQB or close quarters battle, or even just regular combat operations and it's not really maybe it was intended for that, but it's not. It serves okay.
It was better than bang, I got you,
with blanks, right?
And 20 minutes of arguing over whether you actually were got or wasn't got.
Which, believe it or not, pro 9/11 in a lot of military units actually existed.
Oh yeah.
Blanks, bang, 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 you're dead. No, you're dead, and you would be surprised how many military infantry units had to train that way. Yeah, and again, it was so the officers could it was based on exercises. They're trying to get an idea. Worst case scenario, how much can I lose? So it served a purpose, but what it didn't do anything for, it didn't help out at all, was the individual tasks and combat training for the individual Marine or sailor or soldier.
The other thing that Miles Gear develops is you have. So the first, we'll go back to that term we were using earlier, de-evolution. The first step in tactical de-evolution, and I shudder when I use the word tactical because it's so overburdened these days, but the first step in tactical de-evolution for Miles Gear is, I get shot, I'm dead. Mm-hmm. So I'm training myself to give up. Right? The second step in de-evolution of that I see with Miles Gear, or I have seen with Miles Gear, is not only the fact that I'm dead and I'm out of the scenario, but I'm just going to go ahead and get up and slovenly walk off the battlefield and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or do whatever it is I need to do.
No consequence to that action.
Okay,